Hello and welcome to Pete's Paleo Pet Shop, a picture book world filled with a menagerie of prehistoric friends. Today, we'll meet Gertrude the Gargoyleosaurus as she gets a full makeover from sketch to finished painting. The full time to complete her was 15 hours and 30 minutes, spread out over the course of about 2 weeks. But since nobody has that kind of time to spend looking over an artist's shoulder, we'll speed things up a bit.
Pete's Paleo Pet Shop!
Every new painting begins with a ton of research and scouring of the internet for any sculptures, toys, animal photos, or existing paleo art I can use as inspiration or reference. It works best if I can find a fairly accurate toy or sculpture that happens to be in the pose I'm looking for. I'm still learning a lot of basic skills with proportions and how shapes change in 3 dimensions, so finding an object that is already 3D is a huge help here. I quickly draw the basic shapes in the photo without tracing, there's a difference, to help train my hand and eyes to see the basic proportions. Once the basic shapes are down, it's time for the actual sketch. Bright colors help me see the difference between the 2 layers so I don't get them confused. Light blue for basic shapes, red for the first sketch layer as I block out where I want things to go. Sometimes I bring up the older drawing to make sure at least some of the features from Gertrude's older look carry through to the new drawing. Once the messy sketch is done, it's time for a more refined sketch. At this stage, I take out my reference photos for the skeleton and skin textures. I usually mirror the drawing so she's facing the other way too, so that I can see her with fresh eyes and see if I can find anything wonky to fix. I try to find small ways to make sure she's not an exact match to the sculpture reference, but sometimes the pose is just so perfect for what I wanted that it's hard to change things up in any significant way. Every now and again, I hide the undersketch so that I can see what the more refined sketch is looking like. Oh, and I found that baby hippo feet have a very interesting shape. Obviously, the Gargoyleosaurus is not going to have feet like a hippo because it's not a hippo, but it was close enough to the overall shape of the foot that I thought it wouldn't be an exact reference for anatomy, but at least give me an idea of where to distribute little pads of fat and how the hooves might look. Once the refined sketch is done, then I can go over certain areas to make some lines thicker than others. And now it's time for some basic color. Many of the lizards and reptiles that I looked at that had body armor and spikes, there is not a huge color difference between the spikes and the rest of the body. It kind of all blends in. And though there would be intricate patterns and things, the spikes themselves, aside from their overall shape in the silhouette, do not exactly stand out. The horn that covers them, the keratin that covers them, is pretty much based on the color of the skin and other little bumps and ridges that surrounds them. So That's what I tried to accomplish here. Once the basic color is down, I will start having a little bit more detail into it, some texture, because her skin is real bumpy and hard and kind of like the thorny devil lizard that we found earlier. So I bring up my sculpture references to see where shadows would go, and I can start defining a little bit of the shape with basic colors and textures and little dots and hints of scales and stuff, so that it adds a little bit more depth for when I add the shadows later. We got a start of a background. I really like the 3 primary layers. We've got a really foggy, faded, far background, going for a slightly more defined midground, and in a little bit I'll add the shadow, very clearly silhouetted foreground. I'm trying to let the brushes do as much of my work for me, and here I'm experimenting with a lot more texture, kind of a more abstract look while still having foliage. I looked at pictures of a savanna type of environment. Here Gertrude is wandering next to a riverbed that is starting to dry out. Maybe she's looking for a mud hole. It looks hot. And in the midground, in the level where she's at, the middle area, there's always the most detail in the midground, because that is where our lovely Gertrude is standing. And since Gertrude has the most detail, then the area immediately around her also needs the most detail, because that is where we're going to focus. And now time for shadow. I really like the part where I add the shadows, because then she really starts to pop, and it's a great way to suggest the texture of scales. Even if the color doesn't quite make it, the shadows really do. This is where a sculpture that is very close to the position that I want to begin with is very, very helpful, especially when I don't have time to make my own sculpture. In a perfect world, that would be the case, and I would always make my own little sculpture, but it doesn't always work out that way. It was looking a little muddy in this area, pun not intended, but the colors were looking a little muddy, so time to define that with some shadows. Our middle area needs to be not quite as detailed as Gertrude herself, because she's the main focus, but there needs to be some definition there. And for highlights, here Gertrude's texture was looking a little bit on the plain side, so I tried to add a little bit more texture with color. Now, Gertrude to me looks a little bit stiff in my opinion, and the colors look a little bit muddy and muted and messy and kind of too mixed together in some cases, but hey, that's the whole learning process, right? We can't all be total winners, and when you're learning, you're gonna have some doozies and you're gonna have some whoopsies and you're gonna have some mistakes and things that need to be improved and worked on, and that's part of the creative process. And there we go. Now I'm at the point where I've been messing with it for quite some time and the improvements don't seem to be too big. At some point I just choose to just stop working on it, because if I mess with it too much, sometimes I can make those colors just look even muddier and more messed up and more mixed together, and it's just, you don't want to overwork a painting. So it's not perfect. It's far from perfect. There's still a lot of things that could be improved with this, but it's good enough for now, and I'm pretty happy with how she turned out. I think in an effort to make her coloring realistic, I think I kind of made her blend into the background a little too much. But, well. So there we go. Gertrude is finding a nice, cool place to spend on a hot day. And I hope you are enjoying your summer and that you managed to find a nice, cool place also in these hot days. See you next month. Until then, enjoy some other videos that are including some of our cooler, splashier friends in the water, and hopefully they help you feel a little bit cooler. See you next time.